So, Fatherland author Robert Harris tends to have three categories of books. The first is, oh my God, what a brilliant idea. I have to read that straight away. The second category is intriguing. That could be pretty good. The third category is, that sounds painfully boring. So, where does Robert Harris's new novel Precipice fit in those categories? I'll tell you. I'm reviewing his previous book, Act of Oblivion. Act of Oblivion by Robert Harris. So I've always thought that Charles is really only behind the names Harold and John as not very auspicious for a king. We've had two Charleses before the present one. Neither were great examples of how to run a country. And this book is about two men who helped to execute the first Charles and then had to run for their lives from the second. Of all the men living who'd signed King Charles I's death warrant, none were higher up the list for revenge than the third and fourth signatories, Oliver Cromwell's cousin, Ned Whaley, and Ned's son-in-law, William Gough. They fled to America as soon as restoration seemed imminent, and more or less disappear from history and enter into early colonial American myth. So how good is Robert Harris's version of what happened to them next? 1. This book feels authentic. Everything from the first words on the page, the layout, the dramatis personae, you really get a sense of being delivered back into another time. The whole book is a mix of fact and fiction in that way that Harris does best. Even when you know something is speculation, you desperately want his version to be the one that was true. And this means in places things happen the way that they really did. There's a real sense of veracity and tension, knowing that what you're reading might turn into historical fact, and those facts might not be what you wanted to happen next. There's an immediacy to the situations and the characters in this book that is very, very compelling. Harris is a solid writer, and he starts slowly and quietly, introduces the characters, and then lets the tension build. It's not a book where you'll read the first paragraph and say, oh my God, I can't put this down. It's a book that you'll read the first 2 or 3 chapters and then not really want to go to bed until you've read at least another 4 or 5 chapters more. 2. This is an incredibly evocative window into the world of ideologues and Puritans and royalists in the 1660s. The portrait of London is vivid and much better expressed than a few others I can think of in the same period. And its portrayal of the Great Fire and of the Plague are very memorable. It also has really interesting scenes set in Holland and in Switzerland, but by far the thing that steals the show in this book is America. It's an America before any version I knew of it existed, at a time when New Haven could have become a 14th colony and Harvard College was a 2-story house, when New York was New Amsterdam and the passage between colonies was an incredibly dangerous voyage into the unknown. It's a time so early that the English settlers didn't call Native Americans Indians yet. They simply called them heathen. And Harris has this fantastic ability, like Hilary Mantel, of not just transporting you into that world, but rooting you in that world by making you understand the internal motivations of the people who live in it. The world that these characters live in is a constantly changing place where nobody knows what's going to happen next. It isn't history to them. It's the present. And you get this idea that before the American West was this place of danger and intrigue where you could find your fortune, the whole of America was there. This completely unmapped place, which, at least according to this book, appears to be a place for religious nutcases to test their ideas about God and society. And it houses this incredible contrast between the Europeans and the Native Americans, who are mostly seen from a distance. But the Europeans are in an existential struggle for survival, and everything seems incredibly apocalyptic. But the threat to the Indians wasn't quite yet, though you can see throughout the story this balance slowly shifting. It's so fascinating to see a snapshot of all of these many cultures coexisting warily at this time. And what's particularly interesting is the continual amazement of so many Europeans who came there convinced that they are God's chosen, who suffer endlessly and can't understand why the Native Americans just seem to have it all figured out when they're all dying of hunger. These other guys, they just have it all worked out, and all the stuff that they have is better, and all the ways that they've adapted to the environment works better. It's really interesting to see the kind of moral turmoil it puts these religious zealots through. This world is just such a fascinating place to spend time in. 3. You always know where you are, and the characters are strong and well-defined. I'm always a bit worried when you see a list of dramatis personae at the start. Oh boy, if I need this, then this book is in trouble. But you don't lose track of any of the characters. There are 4 main ones. You have Ned Whaley and William Goff, the regicides on the run in America. You have Will's wife, Frances Goff, back in London, essentially in hiding for years. And you have the man who is hunting them all, Richard Naylor, a royalist and a man who has personal reasons for wanting our protagonists dead. If I'm being honest, I often feel that the ideas and the scenarios and the kind of intellectual challenges in Harris's book are often more interesting than the characters. But I think this book contains maybe his best characters. Harris writes a lot of idealists in his work, but I think what's so compelling here is that all of these idealists are constantly having their worldview challenged. They also have very good justifications for their beliefs. I mean, the biggest monster in this book, a character we learn to truly despise, has suffered terribly from other characters who we've grown to really sympathize with and like. You never question the drive for revenge or for flight or to reconnect with loved ones or to build a better world. It's a book that, whether intentionally or not, you see so many parallels with the present day. At its heart, the motivating impulse of all of the characters in this book is to be the one who was always right, to be the one who will finally prove that they are right, of being able to finally silence anybody who would ever say that they were wrong. And the book has, as you can tell from, four pages of characters at the start, a host of really interesting side characters whom you generally care about or you hate, and who you don't know how they'll end up or whether they'll survive. And that's because for 1660 looks like it sucked ass. I have rarely felt more grateful to have not been born in a particular time and place than reading this book. Britain took decades to recover from the self-inflicted wound of the Civil War, further hampered by the most terrible plague, the Great Fire of London, and a real tangible sense of kind of malaise and disappointment that you often get after a failed revolution. For an entertaining read, this book really is filled with human suffering. Everything from the extremes of hanging, drawing, and quartering to the appalling risk of childbirth. Nobody is far from death. And there are just tiny snippets that show the amazing levels of cruelty and indifference. At one point when Whaley and Goff are in Boston, they start getting chased by some Scottish guys and remember, oh yeah, we sold 3,000 of these guys into slavery to make some money during the Civil War. Uh-oh. You understand that the picture of the people you see now doesn't contain the sum of all of the bad things that they've done in the past. And episodes like that make you realize that you wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of any of these characters, even the ones that you like. For all their talk of Jesus, none of these characters have very much mercy. Another fascinating observation about the 1660s which was just mind-blowing, was how globalized that world was, how connected. I would have imagined that the 1660s would be a pretty good decade to disappear somewhere new or to change your identity. I had no idea how impossibly difficult it was for anyone to survive a global manhunt by a king. And it illustrates what a terrifying and difficult thing it was for most of history to move kind of as an exile outside of your own community, outside of your own language, outside of your own geography. And it makes you realize that just because we have CCTV and digital fingerprinting and mobile phone tracking doesn't mean that you could become invisible 400 years ago when everybody knew your name, what you looked like, and the consequences for harboring you, even in a place as far away as another continent. And apart from that, it has some amazing facts brought alive in history, like when the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam became the English colony of New York, basically through threat of violence by the Duke of York. It's called New York because of the Duke of York, not because of the city. I didn't know that. 5. This book is a crime drama, it's a manhunt, it's a love story, and it's a fantastic Jack London-esque survival adventure. We cut between Francis in London and then Manhunter Richard all over the place, and then Ned and Will as they travel through America to perfectly sustain the tension. As soon as one finally gets safe, another will find themselves in peril. And this whole book leads towards this confrontation that we know is inevitable, but have no idea how it will play out. Like all really good narratives about exile and escape, it's really the story of two journeys. There's the external journey to ever new places, to the ends of the world, and the discovery that with a motivated enough hunter, you will never be able to run far enough. And the internal journey of coming to terms with the fact that you will never get to go home, that the world you were trying to make doesn't exist anymore and never will. The journeys these characters go through mirrors how their ideological inflexibility shrinks down their world to almost nothing until the only thing that really still matters is beating that one person who still cares enough to stand against them. The book starts quiet, it builds well, and it ends strong. So what's the verdict? Robert Harris's Act of Oblivion is pure paperback pleasure. You should pick a copy of this up when you can. You will not regret it. He brings you a world that you've never seen before, and he frames it within a story about how civil war creates monsters and victims out of everyone. It's a stunning examination of the toll of an ideological war. No one in this book wins. They all just get left behind. Robert Harris is, to me, quite unique as a writer of popular fiction in the way that he sets himself intellectual challenges in his books. That seems to be one of the things that really drives him. That can be to write the destroyed replies to a set of famous letters. That can be to reframe a historical figure as a hero or a villain. That can be to imagine a Britain where the Nazis won World War II. But I think his best work is always when the challenge he sets himself aligns with the desires of the reader to, be entertained by a fantastically good story. And in this, the desire to uncover what really happened to maybe the most famous disappearance of the 17th century. He creates a story that gives you absolutely everything that you wanted. I tried to go to bed early. I stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning to finish this. Couldn't help it. Alternative reads. So I'm going to do 3 alternative reads. One by the same author, Robert Harris, one set in the same time period, the 1660s, and one with the same driving theme, a manhunt. First up, my favorite of Robert Harris's books, An Officer and a Spy. That is a tremendous read. It's a retelling of the Dreyfus affair, and the only one I've ever read in English that really kind of explains what it was all about and why it was such an enormous event for France, for Europe, really. It's such an incredibly gripping read, and Dreyfus is, in my opinion, the best character that Harris has ever written. Stiff and difficult and enigmatic and wronged and noble, and somebody who you cannot wait to see be vindicated. I think the right word for that book is stirring. Next up, a book set in the same period, the 1660s. If you have never read An Instance of the Fingerpost by Iain, that is a bookshelf forever kind of book. The story nests 4 books narrated by 4 different characters who all witnessed the same terrible miscarriage of justice in Oxford in 1662. Like this book, it paints a picture of this world in unforgettable detail. And I think that the way that Pears plays on your judgments and your expectations based on whose eyes you're seeing that part of the story through has never been more deftly executed. It is absolutely brilliant. And finally, a swashbuckling manhunt. I'm going to go with John Buchan's The 39 Steps. If you've never read that, you will not find a greater story of a man thrown into peril, running against the odds, hiding in all sorts of unpleasant places while trying to escape a different kind of conspiracy. It's difficult to believe that that book is 110 years old this year. And so that's it. All of the links to these books is in the description below. If you click on those links, that helps me out. But if you want to help the world out, go to your local independent bookstore and buy a copy there. If you like this video, you know what to do. And if you really liked it, consider joining the free Substack. There's loads more information that I had to share on this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Monday.